Election showdown.
If you go with what Hillary is saying, in the 9th month, you can take the baby and rip the baby out of the womb of the mother just prior to the birth of the baby.
Donald Trump gains points with pro-life Americans, but faces criticism over his refusal during last night's debate to say he would accept the outcome of next month's election.
The government has no business in the decisions that women make.
Hillary Clinton defends her support for partial birth abortion, making it clear she'll preserve abortion rights and appoint Supreme Court justices who share that view.
I'm Lauren Ashburn in Las Vegas. I'll have reaction to the debate from the spin room about the key issue of abortion.
Tears of joy in Nigeria. 21 Chibok schoolgirls are finally reunited with their families after more than 2 years in Boko Haram captivity. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, October 20th, 2016.
She really has a hatred almost for Catholics. She's got a hatred for evangelicals.
Donald Trump speaking in Ohio this afternoon about Hillary Clinton and leaked emails revealing her staffers' anti-Catholic bias. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Trump is making headlines for refusing to say he'd accept the results of the next month's election if he loses. That comment came during the final presidential debate last night, but the Republican nominee's comments on abortion are firing up pro-life Americans. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump took the stage and went right to work. First topic, the open seat on the U.S. Supreme Court.
We need a Supreme Court that will stand up on behalf of women's rights, on behalf of the rights of the LGBT community, that will stand up and say no to Citizens United.
The justices that I'm going to appoint will be pro-life. They will have a conservative bent. They will be protecting the Second Amendment.
That prompted a discussion on guns.
Because I support the Second Amendment doesn't mean that I want people who shouldn't have guns to be able to threaten you, kill you or members of your family.
They sparred on the border wall.
When it comes to the wall that Donald talks about building, he went to Mexico, he had a meeting with the Mexican president, didn't even raise it, he choked.
And on national security.
Putin, from everything I see, has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United
puppet,
States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear.
But this exchange got attention from pro-life Americans.
Do you want to see the court overturn Roe v. Wade?
Well, if we put another 2 or perhaps 3 justices on, that's really what's going to be, that will happen.
So many states are putting very stringent regulations on women that block them from exercising that choice.
And Trump described Clinton's support for partial birth abortion.
I think it's terrible. If you go with what Hillary is saying, in the 9th month, you can take the baby and rip the baby out of the womb of the mother just prior to the birth of the baby. Now, you can say that that's okay, and Hillary can say that that's okay, but it's not okay with me.
Our chief White House correspondent and political director Lauren Ashburn was in the spin room right after the debate. Lauren reports from Las Vegas.
Wyatt, the day after the debate, and there's one major headline dominating the media. Donald Trump won't say if he will concede the election to Hillary Clinton if he loses. In the spin room last night, we asked staffers about his statement, which the campaign and surrogates tried to walk back. And we seemed to surprise the president of Planned Parenthood by asking about unborn babies.
The spin room surrogates swarmed the media, and stark differences in pro-life stances abounded. What about the unborn? Planned Parenthood President Cecile Richards praised Clinton. Very graphic.
I thought it was very clear he has no idea about women's health care, and I think Hillary spoke very with great empathy and understanding about the difficult situations that women are sometimes in.
While Arizona Governor Jan Brewer couldn't be prouder of Donald Trump.
He made it very clear that he is pro-life and that he is going to protect the life of the unborn. Made me proud.
On the blockbuster claim that Trump won't commit to supporting the election outcome, Katrina Pearson has this to say.
He said he would wait and find out what happens. I always bring up Florida. When there were just a few hundred votes that were different, that was challenged, and rightly so. And that's what he's saying. He's not going to concede an election by 3 weeks out.
And Jeff Sessions, the junior senator from Alabama, defended him.
He didn't say he wouldn't concede defeat. He said he wouldn't, at this moment, say he won't contest the election, is the way I understood it.
The debate hall is empty and crews are cleaning up. Donald Trump is campaigning in Ohio. President Obama will be campaigning for Hillary Clinton in Florida. And I'll see you tomorrow in Washington. Wyatt.
Lauren Ashburn reporting from Las Vegas. Thanks, Lauren. A national pro-life group dedicated to electing pro-life lawmakers says the debate exposed Hillary Clinton's extreme stance on abortion. The Susan B. Anthony list says for the first time, Hillary Clinton was pressed to own up to the fact that there is not one circumstance in which she would protect the right to life of an unborn child, even a baby who is moments from birth. The Susan B. Anthony list says Clinton's position on abortion is widely out of step with the majority of Americans who support limits on abortion. Clinton and Trump have one more face-to-face showdown before Election Day. They will sit on either side of Cardinal Timothy Dolan at the annual Alfred E. Smith Dinner in New York tonight. The dinner is named after the former New York governor, who was the first Catholic to receive a major party nomination for president when he unsuccessfully ran in 1928. And other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. The U.S. military says an American soldier has died from wounds suffered in a bombing in northern Iraq. It's the first time a U.S. service member has died from fighting in Iraq since the launch this week of a massive operation to take the city of Mosul from ISIS. More than 100 U.S. Special Operations Forces are embedded with Iraqi units. Hundreds more are playing a support role, but it's unclear whether the soldier was involved in the offensive. And Turkish jets attacked Kurdish fighters overnight in Syria, claiming to kill 200, but Kurdish forces say no more than 10 of their fighters were killed. Turkey is displeased with the U.S. supporting Syrian Kurdish fighters, which are linked to Turkish rebels. Turkey's prime minister says he hopes the next U.S. president will keep his or her distance from the militia. Viewers from all over the world gathered to watch last night's third and final presidential debate. Around 200 people gathered at a Mexico City barbecue restaurant to see it. The issue of Mexican immigration has taken center stage, with Donald Trump pledging to build a wall between the two countries if elected. There's keen interest in Mexico, with their currency rising and falling in recent weeks, reacting to the polling. And Europe has always taken an interest in U.S. presidential politics. This election is no different. Francis Rocca, Vatican correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, joins us now from Rome. Frank, how is the election being viewed in Italy and the rest of Europe?
Well, it depends on whom you ask. I mean, I think the establishment in Europe is as disdainful and as incredulous about the Trump phenomenon as in our own country. I think, on the other hand, we remember that the head of the Brexit movement actually went to the States and campaigned for Trump and advised him. And all across Europe, you have, nationalist parties and movements that are very skeptical or even hostile to immigration, more nationalistic, and some of their rhetoric is much stronger than Trump's. So I think there's a mixed feeling about Trump. Hillary Clinton is a very familiar quantity associated with obviously her husband's administration, so a much more conventional figure. In Italy, particularly, you have a party. You have a very eccentric party that's one of the major parties here, led by a stand-up comedian, and so I don't think. And then, of course, you have the president of Silvio Berlusconi, who, like Trump, was a tycoon, a media figure, an outsider who came in. And so I don't think the Italians in particular are in any position to sort of point fingers but they watch with fascination, certainly.
Let's talk about the Vatican specifically, because you covered the Vatican under 3 papacies. How do you think the Vatican will approach a Hillary Clinton presidency?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, of course, they have a history with Hillary Clinton, again, from her husband's administration. There was some tension there, especially we remember at the Cairo and Beijing meetings of the UN on population control issues, on abortion. Obviously, a lot of tension about that. Now we have her coming back. We heard her last night. She takes a rather different tack than her husband's administration, which was a bit more moderate on that. We don't hear anything more about safe, legal, and rare. That's for sure. So the differences are even starker with the Catholic Church on those issues. Now, of course, we have a new pope. Now, the Pope tends to take very seriously the sensitivities of the U.S. bishops in dealing with the President of the United States. And we saw that when Obama came here to meet Pope Francis, the Vatican made it very clear that they were concerned about life issues and about religious freedom. There was more harmony on migration. But of course, the U.S. bishops are gradually changing under Pope Francis. We have 2 new cardinals in the U.S. that are going to be created next month, and so it remains to be seen if the tendency will be toward a more conciliatory approach than perhaps we had with the Obama administration under Cardinal George and then Cardinal Dolan. It will be interesting to see that.
Let me flip that question, Frank. How do you think the Vatican would react to a Trump presidency?
Well, we know what the Pope said about Donald Trump back in February flying back with Mexico. He said that if somebody says these things, then he's not a Christian. And he was a little more restrained last month when he was asked about the 2 candidates, and he just said people have to vote their conscience and they have to pray. Clearly, Donald Trump's position on immigration cuts very much against the grain of Pope Francis, who's made very an openness to migration, to refugees, a real major theme of his pontificate. I think there would be a lot of tension on that score, and I don't think it would be offset on maybe some of the more the issues that maybe the Trump administration would be more in sync with the with the church. I think there would be questions about nationalism. I think it would be more fractious, ironically, perhaps, than it would be with Hillary Clinton.
It is interesting, and it's interesting to hear your point of view, being a Vatican correspondent for so long. Francis Rocca with the Wall Street Journal, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Donald Trump dominates Twitter after last night's debate. Twitter says the Republican nominee was the subject of nearly 60% of the tweets sent out about the candidates. According to Google Trends, the top issues researched online were both candidates' stances on immigration, guns, and abortion. Jeannie Mancini, president of the March for Life, joins us now. Jeannie, both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump seemed to be speaking to their bases last night. Do you think Donald Trump won any voters when he talked about sort of his graphic condemnation of partial birth abortion?
Well, I'm not sure if he won any voters, but what he did was he educated the public. And it's interesting, he obviously made some people mad, because I saw all sorts of abortion proponents today saying, this wasn't true, he's wrong. But in fact, he wasn't wrong. He was absolutely accurate. I mean, sadly, in our country every year, we have over 12,000 late-term abortions. And frankly, the procedure that he described, as hard as it was to listen to, is absolutely the way that most of those abortions occur. People just don't like to hear the truth about abortion, but that is the reality.
And on the other side, Hillary Clinton reiterated her support for Roe versus Wade and for Planned Parenthood. If she's elected, what would her administration do to support Planned Parenthood?
Well, gosh, I mean, her very first public speaking engagement after being named the Democratic nominee was to go speak at a Planned Parenthood fundraiser, so we can assume that they'll get lots of support. We saw during the Bush administration that their government funding made up 30% of their billion-dollar budget, and now in a pro-abortion Obama administration, it makes up 43% of their budget. So under Hillary Clinton, that would go up even more. I think it's safe to assume, sadly.
Both candidates were in opposition on a number of issues last night, and obviously abortion is still a very hotly debated topic, at least in this country. Is that a good thing in and of itself?
Well, it's interesting because if you really look at the polls, Americans have consensus about abortion. 80% of Americans want abortion restricted, at most to the first trimester. But that's not right now where our law stands. So I think we should work for that law. We should work to limit late-term abortions. And sadly, we heard last night that Hillary Clinton is even in favor of abortion on demand up until the time of birth. And that's totally out of touch, not only with Catholics, but with mainstream America.
Well, I know there are groups like the March for Life and so many others that will continue to advocate for pro-life causes no matter who wins the election. Jeannie Mancini, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, Obamacare premiums are going up sharply in many parts of the country, and some major insurers have bailed. We take a closer look. And transgender bathroom laws are impacting schools across the U.S. We take a look at North Carolina, the state that brought the debate into the national spotlight. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Before Election Day, many Americans will have another choice to make, their health care plan under Obamacare. But this season, premiums for many of those plans have gone up dramatically, and in some states, premiums are higher than what the insurance companies requested. Joining us now is James Capretta, resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, where he studies healthcare, entitlement, and U.S. budgetary policy. Jim, why is there a sharp increase in premiums?
Well, they underestimated the number of people coming into these plans who needed a lot of medical care. So the profile of the total population in the exchanges is tending to be above average health risk. And that means that the cost of care for taking care of those patients is high. And that means that they didn't have enough premiums to cover their costs in the last couple of years. The insurance companies have lost a lot of money, and now they need to make it up by raising the premiums.
There are some states raising the premiums even more than just what the insurance companies wanted. Why is that?
Because they asked for the premiums several months ago, and now they've learned even more as the months have gone by about their losses, and the insurers have gone back to the insurance regulators and say, we need even higher premiums to make sure we don't lose money next year.
Okay, so what options do people have, now that the premiums are going up, what options do people have if they can't afford the Obamacare?
There isn't a lot of good options, honestly. The thing is that the federal law that passed in 2010 put the federal government in charge of this entire marketplace, and you can't really get insurance that isn't approved and operated by these federal rules. So there isn't insurance available outside the marketplaces, which means you either have to get insurance through this system or you have to go it on your own, which is, of course, a very risky proposition. Most people need insurance.
And obviously, the issue of Obamacare has been brought up in this election. What happens, do you think, to Obamacare after this election? Is it going to be difficult to change legislation?
I think it's going to be quite difficult. Now, if Secretary Clinton wins, she has pledged to build upon the ACA, which means she's not going to change it fundamentally, but she will try to probably subsidize the insurers even more to bring them back in. A lot of insurers have left. With Donald Trump, he wants to get rid of the law entirely and replace it with something else, but I must say what he wants to replace it with is quite ill-defined at this moment.
Yeah, and I can imagine either way, like I said, trying to pass legislation on it is going to be difficult. So.
Yes, in a divided Congress, it would be quite difficult and fractious.
Okay, very good. Well, James Capretta, thanks so much for coming in and talking with us about it.
Thank you.
Transgender bathroom laws continue to create confusion in schools around the country. Recent rulings in Texas and Illinois are generating more legal battles. North Carolina has led the fight against these laws and is currently facing 5 federal lawsuits. That state's law got national attention. It requires people to use restrooms matching their birth certificates in schools and many public buildings and excludes gender identity and sexual orientation from statewide anti-discrimination protections. Tammy Fitzgerald, Executive Director of the North Carolina Values Coalition, joins us now via Skype from Raleigh. Tammy, how important is North Carolina's stand on the issue, and what exactly is the position of your group?
Well, North Carolina is kind of ground zero for the rest of the nation on this issue of transgender bathrooms. We passed a law back in March of this year that would require public agencies and schools to designate bathrooms according to biological sex and to ensure that bathrooms and locker rooms are used in accordance with biological sex. And our organization helped push the law. We have stood behind the law and tried to garner support for it publicly, which really the majority of people in North Carolina support the law, so that was easy. We just gave them an avenue for channeling their support for the law.
And you know, other states are also seeing legal action over related bathroom laws. Do you think this issue ultimately will go to the Supreme Court?
I do. North Carolina is the only state in the country who's passed a bathroom privacy law like the one that we passed in March. But the Obama administration issued an order back in April requiring all public schools and universities to open up their bathrooms, locker rooms, and showers to people on the basis of what gender they identify as. And this has caused a barrage of lawsuits in federal court. In fact, we have 5 lawsuits here in North Carolina, either over our bathroom privacy bill or the Obama administration's federal overreach into the bathrooms of Americans across the country. And what we've seen so far is that courts are issuing differing opinions. You've had a court in Texas who issued a nationwide stay of the Obama administration's new directive, and a court just this week upheld that nationwide stay. Then we had yesterday a court in Illinois that required the local school system to allow a transgendered boy who claims to be a girl into the bathrooms and locker rooms. And so you're having different outcomes in these cases across the country.
And noting the different outcomes, this must cause great confusion for schools. How do you think schools should handle sort of the conflicting rulings that we're hearing?
Well, schools are in a tough position because either their states and their local school systems are in conflict with the Obama administration, or they're in conflict with the parents and the students there in the school system. And when you have a federal determination to redefine the word sex, which is what the Obama administration has done, they have redefined the term sex in Title IX to mean gender identity. And even though that's illogical, that was never contemplated in the history of the passage of Title IX, they've made this determination, and it's coming in conflict with local school board decisions, with the wishes of parents, and with state laws, as the one we passed in North Carolina.
And it is an issue we're going to obviously continue to cover here on EWTN News Nightly. Tammy Fitzgerald, Executive Director of the North Carolina Values Coalition. Thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you.
Up next, the next UN Secretary General hails from Portugal, why he could be a guiding light on life issues. And a happy reunion in Nigeria today for some of the kidnapped Chibok schoolgirls. Thank you for joining us on this Thursday evening, October 20th. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. The new United Nations chief says peace in a conflict-torn world is his top priority. Antonio Gutierrez says the UN has the moral duty to ensure peace. The former Portuguese prime minister and UN refugee chief says he will be promoting a new diplomacy using dialogue to settle disputes. He takes the reins of the UN Secretary General from Ban Ki-moon on January 1st. Joining us now is Nadia Wolf, Director of Advocacy for World Youth Alliance, a non-governmental organization that promotes the dignity of the human person. Nadia, what can you tell us about Antonio Gutierrez's position on the life issues?
Thank you so much for having me. For Antonio Gutierrez, we have reason to hope. Basically, in 1998, when he was the Prime Minister of Portugal, an abortion referendum came up, and he firmly opposed that in the public square. So while nobody gets into controversial issues while they're during the Secretary General selection process, we do know that he has a history of supporting the cause of life. And he also mentioned in his vision statement the dignity and worth of the human person. So good reasons to hope there.
Well, what do you think we can expect his priorities will be, and how do you think your group, the World Youth Alliance, hopes to work with him?
I don't think it's a coincidence that the former UN High Commissioner on Refugees was chosen during a time of great conflict with a lot of displaced people. So that's definitely going to be a big priority. He's identified it, as well as conflict prevention. But he also has a big task in promoting the Sustainable Development Goal implementation, and that's where we would like to be a part, as we have programs to help implement that in ways that respect the dignity of the human person rather than things that are ultimately harmful in there. So that's where we would like to partner with him very much.
How much are UN Secretary Generals actually able to do? I mean, can they shift UN priorities to that?
Well, Secretary Generals can promote kind of what they think is important in those ways, but their job is really to help the international community achieve the goals that they've actually agreed on. So in some ways they can set a lot of tone, but the real authority, I think, is in the UN agency. So he's the head of the peacekeeping missions. He supervises a lot of agencies. Some of those agencies have real issues in terms of promoting life, promoting human dignity, and our hope would be that he will engage in reform, which he has said is a priority, in which we know he made some reforms at the High Commission for Refugees. We're hoping that he'll do that here in ways that kind of make it more open to those of us on the side of life.
Well, like you said originally, Nadia, a lot of reason to be hopeful, and I know a lot of our EWTN viewers are happy you guys and your organization is going to be engaging with him as well. Nadia Wolf, the Director of Advocacy for World Youth Alliance. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Finally, there's joy and gratitude tonight in Nigeria. Today, 21 Chibok schoolgirls are reunited with their families after more than 2 years in Boko Haram captivity. They got to meet the man who signed off on the deal that secured their release, the president of Nigeria. The girls say they are happy and credit God for their safety. Boko Haram snatched 276 of them in April 2014, and the terror group is still holding more than 100 of their classmates. And for those of us who have been following the story, it's nice to see some of those schoolgirls return home. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Good night and God bless.